We are absolutely living the transitional entrepreneur lifestyle today. So if we're not as on point as we normally would be, that's why. But it's all good. We're all good.
That's why I'm wearing a hat.
Yes. Lovely Minnesota.
Hat
Minus
day.
what, 20 windshield feels
Is
like?
it?
No, it's
It's
not.
warmer today than it was yesterday.
Right. Yeah, I think
We love to talk about the weather.
it's definitely below freezing. Yeah, so thank you to anybody who has listened to the first episode. I know that last one, it was more of a general get to know us, kind of get the feel of what it is we're trying to do with this. And then in this one, we're going to talk a little bit more specific into what it is we've been doing, into our actual businesses that we're working on, and where we are in the journey. When did we start? Where are we at? And then how does that what does that translate to you as you do your own thing? Or how can you try to estimate, from our experience, what can you expect while you get on it?
Yeah. I'm hoping too that even though we have very different industries, that a lot of people are able to take tidbits or nuggets of information and apply it to their own small businesses, because there's a lot of things that translate across industries.
Definitely. Yeah, everybody's got to face the same problems in their own way, ultimately. I mean, that's part of the game, right?
Totally.
Now, I will say, for me, I was saying to Kristen before we jumped on here that getting the videos out for the Beginning Guitar Online, right? Thursday's launch day. It's Thursday when we're recording this. So up late until about midnight, hitting publish on that. And then for the anchor job, had to be up at 7 a.m. for meetings until about noon.
The
So
type of day I'm having, I heard you say anchor job, and I was like a newscaster, and I freaking know what you do. Like, that's the type of day I'm having.
yeah, so we're yeah. So it's good, but this is, we want to be real because this is all part of the journey, right? Like we said in the first episode, a lot of times you hear about where people are now, and I was like, oh yeah, that sucked. I worked a normal job, but then I just wrote blogs at night, and now look at me. And you're like, yeah,
Right. Or
but
you like hear about people who are like, overnight I became a millionaire, overnight I started my own business, and it's like, that's bullshit, that didn't happen.
right, yeah, there was 10 years of fantasizing and working and figuring
Blood,
it
sweat, and tears.
out. Yeah, yeah. So I guess, it's, as we record this, we complain about the weather, but it is January, so it is one of the coldest ones for Minnesota. So that making it the best time to reflect on, what's happened in the previous year. So, Kristen, why don't you start us off with what progress you made, even though I know you like to downplay the progress you make. So yeah, castingnits.com. Where are you at?
Yeah. So I feel like okay, if I just like do a gut check and I'm not actually thinking about what I actually did, I'm like, oh, I didn't do that much. But on top of like the pandemic and having a kid and like all of these other things of real life, I've actually done a decent amount of things. Granted, like I've unraveled a lot of it, like literally unraveled a lot of it. So Casting Knits is my website. Um if you go to it right now, you will basically see like a Shopify like coming soon or whatever the little page is, because I just transferred over to Shopify. So I did sign up for Shopify. I got that all signed up and all sorted, which was a huge thing for me. It was the blocker in a lot of ways. I had a WordPress website. I was joking with Dave. I'm a serial website creator and blog creator, not a publisher, not a writer, not a maintainer, a creator. And then I let them sit. I like to like come up with the themes and like do all of the background stuff. And then I like hit publish and like it just kind of sits there. So my goal is to move forward with that. And I am thinking that this transition to Shopify not only is pushing me to do it because I'm paying more for it, I've got bigger
That helps.
stakes in the game, right? But also like taking myself more seriously in some ways. I know knitting to a lot of people sounds like stupid and it's like a hobby, just a simple little hobby or whatever, but it is an entire industry that a ton of people participate in, and it's fascinating, and it brings a lot of joy, and it brings a lot of self-accomplishment, and I really just enjoy it in general. So like over this past year, one of the things that I did is I sat down and I started brainstorming about how I was going to have revenue streams. I literally have like 26, I think it's 26 post-it notes of how I could potentially create revenue with knitting. And I know it sounds like you're like knitting, like, no, there's no way that you'd have 26 potential revenue streams. Yes, I could if I wanted to. I don't want to. That would not serve me at all. So I focus in on 2 or 3 things that support each other in a lot of ways. Blog being one of them. And then the other one's selling patterns. So if you're unfamiliar with the knitting world, which I know Dave is, because Dave was literally like, why don't you just weave? And I was like, I'm not walking around with a gigantic loom. I'm going to take my little needles and walk around with those. Okay.
Yeah.
Plus also they're a weapon.
Exposure to that, other than I know people who do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like self-defense. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. So yeah, focusing on the blog and the pattern writing. If you're unfamiliar with the knitting community, there are free patterns, but if you also like really want, the idea is that if you want a well-written pattern that's easy to follow, that you can totally like make the garment that you see, like you get the exact product, but in the color that you want, and you get to be the one to make it, you buy a pattern. And people actually like self-publish them. And there are forums and like websites all built around this, and people have their own websites, and there's much to do about it. So I know it's not that in particular as a revenue stream is not the money maker. It is one of the money makers. And I think a lot of people who are in that industry think it's the money maker, and they continuously pump out patterns, and it's an exhausting process. And I've actually written my first pattern, but I've literally already unraveled it all. I wrote a pattern for a sweater. I knitted the sweater up to here, realized it wasn't what I wanted, and I literally unraveled it all. This is one of the balls of yarn.
So, okay, I'm going to try to relate that last sentence to something that I do. For me, with songwriting, there are songs that I know I will never release.
Yes.
But I have gotten to a point where they are almost done, or 90% of the way there. So I just finish them to force myself to finish them, even though they're going to sit on a hard drive like forever, ever and a day.
Yeah.
A lot of them are joke songs.
I mean, that brings joy and entertainment, so I feel like there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah.
Even if they just sit.
Yeah, I mean, there's music. Songwriting is such a it's a lot like photography in a sense, where it's a capture of a particular moment.
Yeah.
So, if you were to write something 12 years ago, you're not going to play it the same way or feel the same way about it
Totally.
later on.
You want to talk joking? I created that sweater custom for my dog. My dog clearly does not need a sweater. I laughed the entire time, and the pure joy I got out of it was actually what led me to want to write patterns in the first place.
Right. And your Insta handle is, since you showed it on the
casting knits. That's the place where I'm at on social.
Mm-hmm. So do you think the unraveling at 90% is more to do with your process, or like what makes you unravel it rather than just finish it?
That's a great question. I don't want to put out a product that I'm not feeling like is what I envisioned. And it's not like, if it was something where I was like, okay, I'm like 90% happy with it. This was like a major flaw in the pattern. And it wasn't, you could easily make it, and it was going to be a sweater, it would fit, it would look nice, but it wasn't the right fit, like of what I wanted for that body type. And I shouldn't say body type, for that, like for this sample that I'm making. And I wanted that to translate across all sizes that people would make of this sweater. And I knew that like keeping it, it's called ease, keeping it at the ease that I had, I would not, the next phase you go into like test knitting. So you have a bunch of people test it out and make it in their own sizes and tell you what's wrong with the pattern and like see how they like it and give you a ton of feedback, right? It's like user testing.
Right.
It's literally that. Uh and I didn't want to have people like take pictures of themselves in it and me be like, that ease, it's just not right. It's just not right. I just couldn't live with that. And I'd rather take the extra time to knit up my sample and write the pattern exactly how I envisioned it then. Because and this is actually practice like in knitting. I have ignored mistakes and continued to knit. And now I understand the threshold that I have for like what mistakes I'm willing to live with and which ones I'm not.
Right.
So
Which I think that's I mean, it's an important thing in terms of product development,
yeah,
right? Because obviously you want your company to stand for something specific,
yeah,
have a threshold of quality, right? Um,
totally.
yeah, and that's all the stuff that you don't hear about, right? Nobody ever talks about how many times they went through before they actually got the product, right? I mean, Edison,
Yes,
that one famous quote. My mind always goes to that Austin Powers line
of
about,
course it does.
yes. God, it's just so good. Just so good.
Which one?
What?
Which Austin Powers line?
Where Dr. Evil is like, preparations A through G were a failure, but on the whole, I think preparation H feels good.
Okay, that's on brand for you.
It's just stupid and hilarious, and not to make it grandiose, but I mean that is the process for.
It is. And I think that's actually a piece of it. Like, I think this is exactly what you're getting at. When I like made the decision to unravel it, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do that. And it's been sitting probably for weeks now. I mean, holidays didn't help. Um, and I just need to now get over the mental, like, okay, yeah, I ripped it all apart. And now I
Mhm.
need to build it back up again. And I have all of this foundation laid out. It's not like I'm starting from scratch. I have like the patterns written. I just need to like make sure that the numbers match up. If you're also unfamiliar with knitting, it's a lot of math, a lot of math. But Excel is amazing. So that's a whole other thing. Um, so it's not like I'm starting from square one. And the mental like hurdles that you have to get over when you have to either restart over or take something apart and put it back together again is probably one of the hardest parts I think about doing your own side thing.
Well, it's okay. I mean, you've covered a bunch of ground. I want to pull back a little bit, right? So you talked about product development, right? You're going for your first pattern. You've identified a couple potential revenue streams, even though that those have to be reduced in number and focused, right? Uh,
Right.
in order for you to be successful. Um, but then the buying the domain,
Mm,
setting up the social stuff,
mm-hmm.
that's all of that like front of house, front end,
Mm-hmm.
brand experience kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So do you find yourself just jumping back and forth between those constantly, or
Oh God.
are you setting yourself up where it's okay, Monday is my, front of house day, I'm doing Instagram, and then,
I'm not that organized.
not that, okay.
Okay, so and I shouldn't say that I'm not that organized. If anybody like knows me personally, they know that I'm a total agile junkie.
Mm.
I love Scrum, Kanban boards. I like anytime I can. I literally like Scrum board my wedding plans many years ago. Like I think it might be 4 now. That's how much I
More
think
than
that
a
this
few.
stuff works. What?
More than a few.
More than one. More than one. Um, so I have a running Kanban board and I have it like pretty well optimized. It goes stale every once in a while, but I have everything blocked out of like, this is marketing, this is business, this is pattern design. And so that when I'm doing the work, I have a very clear understanding of what I'm putting effort behind so that I don't get it confused. And I lately, in all honesty, and I kind of feel a little shameful admitting this, I have been putting my energy behind just fun knitting. And
Mm.
I don't like, and then saying it out loud, I don't feel as bad. But like right before I said, I'm like, oh my God, I haven't been working on stuff as much. And I just,
Actually, like rather than
what?
Because you're investing in something you like rather than just
Yeah.
doing the
I'm
thing.
like resting and taking time for myself. And I'm trying to balance that with starting this up. And in the past, I put so much pressure on myself mentally to get stuff started that I feel guilty and really horrible about doing stuff myself. So then I just sit in this mode of like, I feel bad, but I'm not accomplishing anything.
Hmm.
And now I'm like, well, I'm not accomplishing anything, but I don't feel bad. So then I feel better when I do actually start to work on stuff. And it's this weird level of permission that I've been giving myself of like, you do have time to rest. There is no timeline. The timeline that you're putting forth is only on you. And yes, it's important, but like give it the proper weight that it deserves. Don't make it your end all be all and kill yourself doing it on top of it. I have a steady day job that I love, but I also love this other thing. So like the balance between it all. And it's not a balance, it's a shifting constantly.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that was one of the things that caught me up, right? Because it's been 9, almost 10 months since I launched Beginning Guitar Online. And luckily if you go to the site, go to any of the social channels, you'll see my friend Chris. He's shooting a lot of the videos and doing that. He's full-time guitar teacher, violin and acoustic guitar and all that stuff. So he's been doing a lot of the video recording, but then I'm doing all the back of the house stuff, post-production, social media.
So do you feel like that's easier in a sense that like you have two people on it so you don't have to like context switch, or do you feel like it puts different levels of pressure on you? Or maybe I'm leading the witness.
um, it puts me into that project manager bit, because like I'm also trying to shoot videos for myself, but then because I know the full process of everything, okay, if I do this, then I can take the photos and it'll be, the social things, or like right now, based on this, I'm sitting right in the middle of the camera. I wouldn't do that with the BGO stuff, right? Because I need that extra space. So it's like learning those things while doing all the editing. And I wanted to learn the video editing a bit more. I mean, I'm not saying I'm any good at it, but I at least wanted to learn, and I will give myself credit for improving.
I
Um,
mean,
in
that's
do
what we're here to do, right?
Yeah. Um, but the thing I wanted to bring up about it was, I had a plan for the launch. I ignored it like right at the 11th hour, which then,
So is
ba-
this the launch package that you ignored? Or was it something else?
well, so I'm kind of, I have a video idea for this channel that I think I'm gonna tease it up and do a deep dive in
Sweet.
on the launch and what I've learned and all of that.
Okay.
Still thinking about it, thinking that whole thing through. But yeah, I had the whole launch thing. It was all planned ahead of time, and it was like, all right, I'm going to launch with 5, and then I'll be able to roll them out, one a week for, you know, however long, and I'll be good. I'll be ahead of schedule. All the social stuff is scheduled, and then I'll just be able to, shoot video and continually create whatever. Then I was hovering over the button and I knew I shouldn't, but I did anyway, and I went ahead and just launched a whole bunch of videos at once instead of rolling them out. And
I
then
mean, it's a strategy.
it is, I mean, it happened.
Can you
And
call it a strategy if you just gut check it and just do it right away? Or is it a strategy if you plan it out like
well, I had a strategy, and
the
then I just
semantics?
went meh. Which,
Live and learn.
yeah, because I mean the real thing about it and the real learning was that it took me about 6 months to crawl out of that, right? Because to your point,
Interesting.
you have you have the family stuff that you got to do, you have your normal day job you got to do, and then you got to do all this other stuff on the back end. And for me, I get 3-4 hours a night to work on this stuff, and that's if I'm basically from 8 p.m. to midnight, or 9 p.m. until midnight. If
I
I'm
need
doing
more sleep than that.
bedtime. Yeah, so then, I'm up late, I'm doing it, I'm pushing past the brain fog. And I know my limits creatively, so I can tell when my brain is so fried that I'm going to start making mistakes.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because
Huh.
that is a legit thing. And I think like people don't realize, or maybe I didn't realize for the longest time, how much that impacts your actual work. Like, why keep working after that point where you're just gonna have to redo it anyways?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there'll be times where, I mean, even with the day job, right? Having my wife be at home, working from home the last 2 years, she'll come around and be like, "What are you doing? You're supposed to be working." I was like, I'll be like sketching something, like just something to clear my mind.
You
Uh,
have to take a break.
yeah,
Yeah.
grabbing one of the guitars, taking 15 minutes just to, dink around. And it's just like I know I have to do that in order to clear my mind, in order,
I'm the
so
same
that
way.
I can be present when I need to be, right?
Yes.
And my argument with her too was, if you think about what your actual day was at work, you say you work 8 to 5, but really you roll into the parking lot at like 8.
Mm-hmm.
It takes you 10, 20 minutes, depending on the size of your parking lot, to get in. Then you sit down, and then you have a bunch of drive-bys of people saying hi, or,
Yeah.
you have this project status. No, great, give it to me by the end of the day. Or then inevitably you have the person that's like, "Oh, hey, how's your coffee? Let's go get coffee." So then you walk and you have a hallway talk, getting
Yep.
home. And then you go to your first meeting,
Yeah.
and
And
so
part of that, like,
and
there, not only is that good for like our brains, but it is good for companies too, to some degree. That's like that social structure. And right now in COVID, we're not getting that. And like, I'm actually really glad you brought this up, because I was actually talking to my therapist about this, and she's like, back before the pandemic, you'd have stimuli coming into your space whenever that you'd have no control over, and your brain was like able to take that in, and now your brain's not getting stimulated that same way. So like everything that you're choosing to do in your home, that is not a stimulus that you like, your brain's like, you're not getting your needs met in that way, like the stimulus isn't there.
right, right.
You brought up an interesting aspect though that I'd love to ask you more about. um Spouses
Hmm.
and negotiating or discussing, whatever you want to call it, the side gig thing and the time spent on it. So like, have you encountered difficulties there? Because I
Uh,
sorry, I have.
yes. And that's about as much as I'll put on the public record.
That's fair. That's fair. You're married to a
No,
lawyer, so I get it.
yeah, no, she'll listen to this and be like, "David!" Um, even though that's really more of an impression of my mom.
I was gonna say that doesn't sound like her.
No, so that's where setting up the schedule is really important, where, in the mornings, it's my responsibility to do this and this in order to get my son out the door for daycare. And then, work, I make lunches, work, and then I go pick him up. So, and in that sense, I have very definitive start stops
Yeah.
throughout, which is nice. It's not just like the endless whatever. Um, but then it's really important for me that when I'm doing something, that I am there 100%.
Yeah.
So, I don't have I'm not the person that will be sitting and texting during a meeting. I still think that that's extremely rude, and you shouldn't do it. And so I refuse to do that. Yep.
Hmm.
Um, and so when my son's in the house, I am present with him. And
Yeah.
even if I've seen, this particular Pokemon episode like 7 times, I will watch it an 8th time, because he wants me to,
That's
right?
my philosophy on parenting too. Being super
Yeah.
present.
And, can it be annoying? Absolutely. But it's
Yeah. And
important.
draining,
Yeah.
mind numbing.
Right. And it is, but it is important. Um, so then the time for me to record and to do the um post-production stuff is at night when he's, in bed.
So it sounds like you guys have a routine established and like a schedule to aid in any communication, and like establish boundaries because of that schedule too,
Mhm.
to enable you to work on your stuff.
That is, our family is highly disciplined in that sense, right? I know some of the other parents that we've, hung out with or talked about, where like, oh, what time do you let your kid go to sleep? And I'm like, 9:30 every night, no matter what, he's asleep, right?
Yep.
We have a
Mine's
whole
in bed by
process
7 p.m. every night.
beforehand. Obviously there are times where he stays up later and it becomes a thing, but um,
Totally.
it's just being part of human. But we have a very like, it is such and such a time. It is time that we do this, which is what you do before, this, that, and the other, and then you go to bed. So you have this like wind down time. Um, and I think that, I mean, that works for us. Uh,
Yeah.
but then seeing a lot of the more like, loosey goosey um things, I don't know that I could live that way. Where it's just like, oh, the kid tells me when he's tired. No, no. Mm-mm.
I mean, if it doesn't bug other people, it's not a problem for them, then it's not a problem for you because you don't have to deal with it. That's how, like, I'm a firm believer of like, I know you and I differ on this. If it's your family's rules and it doesn't affect me, I don't care. You do you. Like, I don't care what time your kid goes to bed. But like for our family, we do have a certain boundaries that we adhere to too. We have like similar schedules. Like we know who's doing the pickup, we know who's doing the drop off, whose days is what to do what, who's
Yeah.
making dinner on what days. And then if we deviate from that schedule, we have a conversation about it.
So I think that's interesting because everybody's situation is different, right?
Totally.
Obviously, I can armchair expert as much as I want, but I know
Yeah.
what works for my family, and that's it. And
Yeah.
I don't really care what anybody else thinks about it. It works for us.
Yeah.
Um, but then I cook. I'm responsible for all the meals. So um, there's just no arguing that.
I mean, if you know that's
Yeah.
established though, then that's like, that's where that's at.
Yeah. So I mean, it's fine. It's just, to your point, it's a balance. And one of the more interesting things, actually, when you talk about finding things out throughout the process, I've discovered that for whatever reason, Wednesday evenings, out of all the evenings throughout the week, is when I am the most fried.
That makes sense though with your launch date being Thursdays.
So yeah, I don't know what it is though. Because most of the time I'm like ahead of schedule because I know I have to hit this particular point in order to do
You're
this.
still making my point. I'm ahead of schedule. I'm burnt out by Wednesday. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I did talk myself into that, didn't I?
I mean, you can fight me on it.
Well, and let's.
All right.
No, but it's just interesting because I have noticed that like even when I don't have to go and schedule something,
Mhm.
right? Like I'm not doing the last minute, cuts and promotions or whatever. Like things have been scheduled for a while, and I have a free Wednesday or whatever. I will be just toast. So that is the only day when I feel that way where I will be like, all right, I'm just gonna not do anything.
That's also a thing though too. Like you're subconsciously giving yourself permission to like not work on something. So you're like, that's a thing.
Hmm.
Psychologically, that's a thing. I don't know the word for it, but it is.
I'll take your word for it.
I mean, you should, because armchair expert here.
Right, right. I'm just, that's what I've experienced, and so that I've baked that into my process.
That's smart. So you're actually looking at how, not just like how you plan things, but actually how they've gone and then accommodating for that.
Mhm.
To me, that's genius. Like, that's definitely not, I'm not at that stage yet. I'm like, I didn't feel like doing something. I'll do it tomorrow. The
Yeah,
dog's pooping everywhere, the kids pooping everywhere, like it, and then tomorrow doesn't happen.
yeah, you're definitely in a different stage.
I mean, my kid's a little younger, so
Yeah,
I mean, she did just pee on the rug this morning, so I shouldn't say that out loud. Obviously, that was my fault because she wasn't wearing a diaper.
you did kind of ask for it then. Yeah, that's
She's been so good. We've been doing like whatever. We have a new routine. It's been working really well up until today. Obviously, mom's responsibility, not kids' fault. Kids' fault, mom's responsibility. Anyways, um, so no, on the partner thing, it was really interesting. My husband was, when I first told him about casting knits, he was like, "Oh, so another blog that you're gonna start and just not do." And I
Mhm.
was like, "Wow." But he made a valid point, and now I can joke about it. At the time, I was like,
Mhm.
"No." And we went through this ebb and flow of like, it's not that he wasn't supportive, because he is like one of the most supportive people I've ever met. But he was just like, "Wait, what, why?" And I was like, "I just want to."
Mhm.
Like, and then because he felt bad about like not fully like buying in and supporting me from the get-go, he did a 180 and was like, "Let's get you a new laptop, let's get you a new camera, let's get you this, like all these things." And like he basically wanted to drop like a couple grand, more than a couple grand on it. I was like, I just no, no, no. And it freaked me out totally. So we have kind of come to terms where I just don't talk about it.
Do you find that difficult? Like, do you
No.
find yourself wanting to?
I mean, I talked to him about like pattern stuff or like knitting stuff, because he talks to me about his hobby. Um,
What is
but what?
what is his hobby?
Hockey.
Oh, okay.
So hockey gear constantly is in our, like we're talking about hockey gear in our house and his game that he played or the practice that he's on. So I'm like, I don't feel bad about telling you about like this knit that I just totally screwed up on, or like look at me and like whatever. So it's I talked to him about bits and pieces. I don't talk to him about the like the business side about it, at least right now. Because frankly, like I don't need another reminder that I might be a failure. So I failed a lot. I've had a photography business. I've had a bunch of other stuff that I like, I'd call a failure in some sense, but the learnings that I've gotten from them, I like want to implement and actually prove to myself that they were not in vain.
Okay, so it's interesting because we've recorded the first episode a couple of times, right? Because we were
Hmm.
figuring out how to set up the 9 to side thing,
Totally.
the legs on it, and you've talked on, this was a failure, this was a failure, and I would challenge your definition of a failure,
No, you're right.
but it's also, I guess, my perspective on things was just, well, it just wasn't time yet. It's not that
Yes.
it's not that it was a failure, it just was the wrong time. Because like I know for me, if I knew a lot of the stuff I know now about the music stuff, I would have been
Hmm.
much more successful back in the day.
Right.
I was not psychologically there to even have been able to execute on, that knowledge if I had had it, right?
This is such a good point.
And so it was all necessary to get to where I am, and
Yes.
I don't, discount that, but it just wasn't time.
No,
Mm.
there's so much to that too. Like, not just so like during those same time frames, we had both graduated from undergrad in the height of the recession. I think we've already like touched on this. The mental effects of being in a recession and being told to go to college and get a degree and you'll have a job, and like having good internships and then suddenly nothing, is
Mm.
a complete mind fuck. On top of interpersonal relationships, having to move back home, like all of these things, and then being young. I was a kid. Like this was over 10 years ago. Like I was a kid. Like I did not know, I didn't have the confidence about for anything or the wherewithal to give myself the space to be like, hey, right now you don't need to push yourself too hard. You don't need to have these unrealistic expectations. Like, I think back and I know I could have been one of those like really ridiculously like rich photography bloggers, because I could have started talking about everything that I was doing and talked about my failures, and I could have made a ton of money off that, because I've seen photographers do that.
Right.
And I didn't do it. My path still weirdly led me to a lot of things I found interesting, like social media.
Right.
And so to your point, like, I just needed the time to kind of get some of this. Like, I needed a healthy relationship. I needed to not live in my parents' basement. I needed to pay off a bunch of my debt. I needed to do a bunch of these things to get into a new spot of feeling confident in myself and figuring out who I was even more than I had before, to like even have the basis to do something and still be healthy, do a side business and still be healthy.
So I know, one of the things that we talked about was making sure that we talked about like things that we found helpful, right?
Yeah.
Along the way. So
Yes.
as as you went through that, was there anything in particular that you found helpful to reframe things, or
God,
um,
yeah.
because I know we've talked about podcasts. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we're starting this, watching YouTube videos, again, one of the reasons we're starting this, sharing the same mediums that were helpful. But
Yeah. I think this sounds so, I think a lot of things that I'll probably say around, God, it's so intertwined though. Mental health, your mindset, your perspective on things,
mm,
because it's your side business, because it's your business, it's your job, it's your jam. It is completely and utterly 100% intertwined.
mhm,
So we cannot talk about your side thing without talking about mental health or your mindset or any of those pieces. And this is where like a lot of my stuff gets kind of granola-y, but I do truly believe in it. Like journaling. If you're not going to take the time to do therapy or like talk about your feelings to someone else, journaling, getting a different perspective, getting something out, processing what has happened to you can do wonders. And like we see this in business. When you have a report out or a readout, or you recap your year or your quarter, you can then go, look at the good work that we did. Like, I don't have to feel bad and shitty about the 3 things I did because they were epic. Like, this is not new,
yeah.
but it's hard to realize, I think, that you have to do it for yourself because it is part of self-care, and that is a part of your business too.
And it's interesting you say that, because um, in December, beginning of January, I put together the infographics around BGO stats, and so I'll share those out as I do the other video or whatever. But you saw them, and to your point at the beginning of this thing, it really was sitting down and going, oh man, I have done a lot, because I was just so in the grind of, okay, post-production here, video editing here, social media there, responding to comments, trying to figure out, okay, am I doing, YouTube search algorithms correctly? Like what, how can I optimize this, do that? Is there a better process? All those things. Poking my head up after 9 months is like, oh, this explains why I've been tired.
Yeah.
Because it was something like 56 videos, 40 web pages and blogs. And then each video is at least 4 social media posts, if not more. Then I curated about 1,500 articles to share out on the newsletter, which was, I think, about 18 newsletters that was sent out throughout the year. So yeah, I
Just the
think
sheer number, not even looking at like obviously quality because you're gaining traction, but like just the sheer number of the work that you put in, taking stock in that, pulling your head up from the hard work that you're doing. I think that's one of the lessons that I think I learned from early on. So yeah.
yeah, and I would encourage anybody else to schedule those things in, because putting
Yes.
together the information on those infographics, I mean, that was 2-3 days worth of work that I could have been doing on something else, but it was important, to sit and do that. And that became a priority. Also, just because, I do have so many different constituents that have helped me throughout the year, that I wanted to at least say, give them something to say, look, this is what you've been supporting. Thank you for the help along the way. Here's what we've done. And it's only, it's only the 9 months, but it's at least something. This is what's up.
I think this is very much entwined too with taking time to rest / develop strategy. So like, and this is what I think I'm really good at, and I'm a little less good sometimes about action, and so I need to like get in those modes where I like do action a little bit more. But letting your brain, so if you take all the things that you've worked on, you looked at it, not only in terms of which, like, we're going to talk about, you're going to go in a deep dive for BGO. I'm going to do summations too from casting nits and stuff, holding me accountable of doing work. Yeah. To really understand like what that looks like. But then you're sitting there looking at it, and it's informed decisions now that you can make. So you can sit there and actually take time and breathe and relax and do a hobby or enjoy time with your kid, and go, and suddenly, because those cogs in your brain of your machine of your brain, because I can't speak because I don't have any cogs, can actually rest and then process some of this stuff. So like you start going, okay, how can I get the same amount of traction with the people that are viewing I'm using you as an example, my videos, but actually produce fewer videos? Is there a way to do that? Like and then like, or identify problems. I'm exhausted by Wednesday and I no longer want to feel that way because it's not sustainable. How do I figure that out? And you have numbers and actual tangible things to go off of. So like, it's all a part of it. I think it's probably the piece that people don't value enough. They just value hard work, the grind, the constant grind.
Yeah, I think that's the thing to talk about too, is, for anybody who hasn't actually launched the thing, right? But they have the idea that they want.
Sheepish. No, I'm just kidding. I'm fine. Cool.
Taking actionable steps to sit down and map it out, right? I mean, you did that. I think you said it was something like 26 post-it note.
Yeah.
Or whatever, right? I mean, that is a tangible
I have
thing.
many whiteboards too of like various like strategies and processes too. So I just need to start putting.
Right. And everybody has their own process. So if you're unfamiliar with your creative process, that's going to be a whole story in and of itself, right?
Yes.
I know what works for me for different types of media. So like when I'm writing, that is late at night down in the kitchen with a cup of tea and a specific music playlist.
Oh, I like the visual.
And it's just a free writing, because I know I have to get it out, and then editing is later, because editing is the work. Writing is fun. Editing is.
Yep. That was me with photography. Photography is fun. Editing, that's the work.
Right. But yeah, same with the videos, like actually taking the time and outlining what you want to say first. That is a skill I'm currently developing.
Same.
But also just, getting in front of the camera and doing it, and then seeing the feedback and being like, okay, this needs to change, that needs to change, I need better lighting, I need to stop saying so much, sit up. All those kinds of things, right? It all just takes practice. It
does. And actually, like, we could probably go into a whole nother episode of like true confessions. I am very like trigger shy of like actually putting stuff out there, and I need to probably address that sometime in the future. We'll get there.
Right. I think we'll leave it there as a cliffhanger.
Such a good one.
To be addressed at a later episode. Yes.
You'll have to come back for more.
Right. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. If
Thanks for being here.
Like and subscribe, share, comment, leave any questions in the comments below. If you're in the podcast player, please rate and review. It helps us with the algorithms and being found by other people. And we'll see you in the next episode. Appreciate it.
Later.